And a very good morning to you. Welcome along to Off the Ball AM this morning. As ever, if you want to get in touch with us, you can drop us a comment wherever you're watching this. You can tweet us at Off the Ball AM. You can leave a comment on youtube.com/Off the Ball or facebook.com/Off the Ball as well. A very, very busy show for you this morning. A little bit later on, we're going to talk to you, Bryan Robson, who was in studio with us yesterday as part of a competition that Carling have to give you the opportunity to play on a Premier League pitch. He brought the trophy with him. We were looking very longingly at the trophy yesterday. Can't actually pick it up. I mean, we could have picked it up. We could have just picked it up and gone, what are you going to do about it?
I wonder, was Bryan Robson allowed to touch the trophy?
Burly security guards, what are you going to do about it? I mean, okay, you'll wrestle us to the ground and pin us there and not get up for about 20 minutes. But we'll have got a picture, one of us will have got a picture of the other one. And then we'll have a great story. How I was wrestled to the ground by the Premier League champion attendance trophy burly men.
The grandkids would never hear the end of a story like that. It would be the best story of all time. Granddad lifted the trophy once and got beaten up by a big guy who was brought over from London to actually mind this trophy. But as I say, I wonder, was Bryan Robson allowed to touch it?
I think so.
If he said to him in the middle of the interview, Bryan poked that trophy, I wonder would he have actually done it? He probably, yeah, I guess he is kind of the one person.
He's not going to get battered. There's no chance of him being collateral damage. We're like, who are you guys?
Yeah, that's probably true. He wasn't wearing white gloves, mind you. He would have touched it with his bare hands, which might have, everybody's got fingerprints, and it could have left a stain on the trophy.
Also going to join us a little bit later on, Paul Galvin's going to be in studio around about 8:30. Going to be talking about some of the latest trends in the world of sport and business and the crossover there. Might talk some football with him as well. And we're going to speak with Martina Devlin about the fallout from the Belfast Rape Trial. We'll also obviously be bringing you up to date and everything else going on in the world of sport. And as I've said, if you want to leave comments for us, hit us up wherever you are watching us this morning. Now, let's take you through the front pages this morning.
OTB AM. In association with Air. Get Air Sport free with Air Broadband.
We'll start with the Irish Times this morning. Most difficult rape trial ends in acquittal of all four accused. It's Conor Gallagher's story. He's got extensive coverage of the case inside the Irish Times this morning. We'll go through that in terms of details over the next few moments. The front of the Irish Daily Star this morning says, cleared, Jackson lawyer slams system, holding sorry for hurt girl. Upset accuser has no regrets. Toxic social media is blasted. The front of the Irish Examiner, meanwhile, this morning says, rugby star status, reason for trial. That is a story by Leslie Ann McKeown. Police and prosecutors defend handling of the case amid criticism. That's the front page there. The Times Ireland edition, meanwhile, goes for the angle, hunt for web users who outed rape trial woman. Prosecutors defend case as rugby stars cleared, and lawyer attacks onslaught of toxic content. A couple of other front pages this morning. The Irish Daily Mail goes, justice, a young woman grilled by 4 barristers over 8 days, the disturbing sexual antics and bragging of sports stars laid bare. Accuser and accused vilified online after the most shocking rape trial of our time sees all 4 acquitted. Did any good come out of this unedifying process? That's the front of the Irish Daily Mail this morning.
The Irish Independent, another picture of Paddy Jackson on the front. There are no winners here. Olding sorry for hurt caused. Jackson status drove prosecution. Complainant upset at verdict. That's the front of the Indo. The Irish Sun, it's over. Jackson, thanks for a fair trial. Olding, I'm sorry for hurt caused. Police, rape claim girl upset. That's a picture from the night of the alleged incident on the front page there. And then the Irish Examiner sports section asking, next step, what now for acquitted Ulster and Ireland duo? Obviously, there is going to be an investigation by the IRFU. A committee has been put in place by the IRFU and also by the, which can be made up, of IRFU members and also Ulster Rugby. There's the text of the press release yesterday. A review committee made up of senior representatives of the IRFU and Ulster Rugby has been appointed and will conclude its review as soon as practicable. The players will continue to be relieved of all duties while the review committee is in process and determining its findings. So what are we at? We're at the end of March. I guess there's a good chance that those contracts are allowed to run down and that the next time Stuart Olding and Paddy Jackson take the field, that it will be somewhere outside of Ireland, which would obviously, given current selection criteria, more than likely mean the end of their Ireland careers as well. So strong speculation in many of the newspapers this morning that French and English clubs have been keeping an eye on Jackson and Olding. We'd heard in the past that Exeter had been interested in signing both players. They'd been linked with both players. Certainly that was the rumour mill doing the rounds amongst the rugby fraternity, but there's been no confirmation, obviously, of anything, and I suspect there won't be any confirmation for quite a while.
Just a couple of other front pages this morning as well, just two here. The Herald goes with not guilty on the front page of this morning's newspaper. And the last front page, when it comes to this story, is vile trial. That's the front of the Irish Daily Mail. Lawyer blasts Twitter. That's an angle, as we've said, that a lot of the newspapers are going with this morning. The newspapers, though, as I say, kind of giving an unbelievably comprehensive breakdown of this case that I guess was impossible to do on broadcast media over the last 24 hours.
Yeah, so just some interesting stuff that we've been trying to pick out bits and pieces of this that maybe was relatively new information or stuff that had come through. Nicola Anderson in the Irish Independent speaking about the judge. Amid a pressure cooker environment rare in its intensity, this would have been no easy trial for any judge. At the heart of it all was a vulnerable witness who was facing relentless questioning at the hands of no fewer than 4 legal teams on the behalf of the defence, pushing things as far as they could be pushed under law. Obviously, the attendance of Rory Best comes up, and we'll get some more details on that in just a moment. But some more details from Nicola Anderson here about the judge. As a junior counsel, she was part of the legal team representing the families in the Bloody Sunday inquiry. Softly spoken and at all times measured and courteous, she was nevertheless most determined in the running of this trial. It was clear that she would do everything in her power to avoid the possibility of a mistrial, even down to allowing the defence barristers to make several amendments and suggestions to her final direction to the jury. That was interesting because people were, in her final direction to the jury, it definitely felt like there was a lot of the defence case present in it, down to and including the fact that the character witness for one of the men had actually got in touch to give that character witness on spec, as opposed to it having been solicited by the defence team. But it's just interesting that they had an influence over the closing remarks, and I wonder if that's unusual. I don't know if that is fairly standard procedure or not.
The Conor Gallagher article today on page 4 and 5 of the Irish Times is pretty exceptional. It breaks down everything. There's a couple of bits I've picked out. One of the major themes that's kind of come in discussion programmes as a result of this is the different jurisdictions here, the Republic of Ireland versus Northern Ireland. And I'm just going to read out some of Conor Gallagher's article from this morning. During 8 days on the stand, the complainant gave evidence from behind a curtain. She was able to see the judge, the jury and the lawyers, but the rest of the room was obscured. Everyone could see her though. A camera in front of the box transmitted her evidence to a video screen placed in front of the dock and the public gallery. The woman is entitled to lifelong anonymity and there are severe penalties for publishing her name. However, in the UK, unlike the Republic of Ireland, the public is allowed into rape trials. It wasn't long before her name was widely known and shared on social media. The other element of that then, which I think kind of people were chatting about during the case, was about the defendants taking the stand. And I'm just going to read out this part as well. In the Republic, it's relatively rare for defendants to decide to give evidence in their own defence, while taking the stand allows the accused an opportunity to give their version of events in their own words. That's obviously different in the north. The dynamic is different. Juries are told they can take an inference from a defendant's choice not to give evidence, and if they do take the stand, the jury is instructed that this supports their credibility. Hence, it is more common for defendants to give evidence in the north, which kind of clears things up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely one of those moments where you're like, ooh, they're going to give evidence, but obviously it happens a bit more there. Was there one other bit?
Yeah, so when it comes to them taking the stand, Toby Hedworth reserved his most ruthless cross-examination for McIlroy and took his time grilling him about the major discrepancy. The barrister suggested the men had got together at a cafe the next day to circle the wagons and engage in a cover-up. By this stage, they knew the woman was alleging rape and they needed to get their stories straight, he said. Counsel said each man was assigned a fabricated story about their actions that night, but McIlroy got mixed up when interviewed by police. He gave the account Olding was supposed to give. It became known as the circle the wagons theory. The accused rejected it, insisting the woman had performed consensual oral sex on him. It's an interesting account of the end of the trial as well. Gallagher writing here, just I guess about the testiness, 8.5, 9 weeks, went on longer than people expected, as Frank was telling us in the programme yesterday. So I'll read out Conor Gallagher's section of his article here once again. The lawyers and even the judge began to look as if they would rather be anywhere else, and clashes over legal matters became more frequent. The jury was also showing signs of strain, appearing more tired and drawn than in earlier weeks. The trial was scheduled to last 5 weeks. By the time it reached week 9, 2 jurors had already fallen ill, with one recovering and one being excused permanently. Another juror had a cruise booked, which they were forced to postpone at the urging of the court. As the judge prepared to send the jury to deliberate, the accused men looked similarly exhausted. Harrison, who earlier in the trial was spotted outside giving a solicitor the use of his umbrella during the inclement weather, clashed with a photographer as he was leaving court. The overrun was causing financial problems too. Olding had run out of money to pay his legal team about halfway through the trial and had to apply for legal aid, which Judge Smith agreed to grant. So there's bits like that which hadn't exactly been to the forefront of reporting throughout the case. There's a number of different things in this article and indeed throughout the print media.
I should say as well that there are still reporting restrictions in place. Highly unusual move by the judge rather, to prevent all of the legal arguments that happened during the case to be reported on. So what happens in cases like this, the barristers on both sides will present legal arguments. The jury is removed from the trial room while that's happening, and the reporters can't report on what's happening. This tends to be quite important. It's like whether or not certain elements of evidence are inadmissible or stuff like that generally. Now, for whatever reason, at the end of a case, ordinarily, all of that can then be reported on by whoever is covering the case and has been covering the case from day one. So you would expect that Frank Graney and his colleagues would have had a load of extra information that would have come to the fore yesterday. That has not been the case. The judge has placed a reporting restriction for a period of time, which will be removed, we believe, perhaps next month.
Yes. Another passage, as you mentioned there, evidence which wasn't actually brought to the case but is allowed to be reported upon now after the case. Again, I'm reading Conor Gallagher's article here regarding the texts. In the group, this is the WhatsApp group, Jackson and Olding boasted about spit roasting the woman. This word was a point of contention in the trial. The defence maintained spit roasting could mean any sexual activity involving 2 men and a woman, while the prosecution suggested it very specifically means a woman penetrated orally and vaginally by 2 men at the same time. To prove this, the prosecution had hired an expert in slang language to write a report on the exact meaning of the word, although this was never presented in court. One other piece I'm going to read out is regarding social media and Rory Best. When Best turned up with Ulster teammates Ian Henderson and Craig Gilroy, their photographs walking into Laganside Courthouse quickly spread around the internet. Best, along with former Ulster player Ruan Pienaar and mixed martial arts champion Liam McCourt, had been asked to appear as character witnesses for Jackson. Calling character witnesses during a trial is unheard of in the Republic, but is permitted in Northern Ireland. It then goes on to outline the furore around Best and the Six Nations in the press conference. Then Gallagher writes, the jury was told the following week that Best had been instructed to attend by the defence. In the end, none of the well-known names appeared as witnesses. Instead, Jackson's former Ulster teammate Declan Fitzpatrick, his brother's partner and a family friend, gave evidence of his good character. And finally on this point then, throughout the trial, both the prosecution and defence kept a close eye on both traditional and social media, looking for any commentary which could influence the jury. There were some raised eyebrows when Taoiseach Leo Varadkar briefly alluded to the trial during a radio interview on the issue of abortion in cases of rape. On this occasion, the lawyers decided not to raise it in court.
Yeah, that was speaking on Pat Kenny on News Talk. And there's some more detail on that in the Irish Independent as well. Right. In a moment, we'll speak with author and journalist Martina Devlin. First, though, let's just bring you some of Frank Graney, our court correspondent, who obviously has been covering this trial from the very start. He was on with Joe last night after recalling all the 10 weeks and going into some significant detail. If you missed that, it's worth digging out the podcast for that. You can get it on offtheball.com. Frank told us about the impact the trial has had on Belfast as a city, a rugby town, and how members of the public were in the gallery throughout the trial.
Yeah, well, I think I underestimated how big a rugby town Belfast is. You can really feel Ulster rugby on the streets of Belfast. Buses pass by with the likes of Rory Best emblazoned across them. There are billboards, a sports shop with Ulster rugby shirts in their front windows. Everybody talks about rugby. Everybody is passionate about rugby. This obviously coincided with the Six Nations campaign as well. So everybody was talking about Irish rugby, about how well the team was doing in the Six Nations, and obviously the fact that they won the Grand Slam. There was great excitement about it. There was great excitement about the Ulster players that took part in that successful campaign. I know it's a hard measure to gauge, but certainly those 75 seats in the public gallery were mostly taken up by supporters for the four defendants. That's not to say that the complainant wasn't represented there, but it was just clear that there was far more support for the guys. Their families and friends were obviously there. I overheard two men who were in the case, in the trial throughout, and they were asked by another member of the public gallery who they knew or who they were related to, and they said they didn't know any of the guys, that they were fans of Ulster Rugby and they were just there to lend their support to the guys. So there was a real sense of support for the boys. It was palpable. You could see it in the public gallery at times, particularly during closing speeches, for example, when emotions are high and the finish line is nigh. Take, for example, Arthur Harvey, who was representing Blaine McElroy. Towards the end of his closing speech, there was actually an impromptu round of applause from some people in the public gallery. I was walking down these stairs afterwards and somebody approached me to say how impressive that was. And when I said that each of the closing speeches were impressive in their own little way, this person challenged me again and said, yes, but surely Mr. Harvey's was the most impressive. And I simply told him that I wasn't allowed to have an opinion on individual speeches. But that was kind of the support that you felt in the courtroom throughout the 9-week trial was in general for the guys.
Frank Rainey there, speaking on Off the Ball last night, detailing the level of support that had been evident in the courtroom for the defendants. Now, Martina Devlin is with us. She's a columnist with the Irish Independent and an author. Martina, this case, obviously, rather than talk about the specifics of it, because we don't want to get ourselves in too much trouble, it throws up a whole heap of issues about the legal system, and I understand there are significant differences between the legal system in the north and the legal system here, but not that many really when it comes down to the experience of complainants / victims. But it also raises significant issues around team sports and how men behave in private groups when they're talking about women. And it also raises the issue of consent and just how ill-equipped Irish people are when it comes to talking about consent, asking for consent, and it would seem in understanding that consent has been withheld.
Well, look, we're all flies on the locker room wall now, aren't we? And the way that men think about women and talk about women is really deeply unsettling. And I should say it's not all men, but it seems, in fact, it's not even the majority of men, I believe, but it seems to be not unusual among some very highly pumped sportsmen. And what I notice is you come across things like this in soccer and in rugby, where you don't have too many female participants, but it's not a situation you hear about in terms of, say, sports like tennis or sailing, where lots of women compete. So is that something? Is it that it's young men together in a pack mentality, not interacting very much with women, except then in these social settings where they have celebrity status?
I guess one of the other things is that most sports ask their teams to behave with a pack mentality. They ask them to have a singularity of vision. They ask them to have a togetherness and, let's all die for the team. And that's grand, that's great on the field of play. It's actually a really positive thing that you can get a bunch of people together, unified behind something, but...
Sure, but the pack mentality is not a good modus operandi in life, and we know that in Ireland if nobody else does. Put on the green jersey for Ireland. I mean, the whole banking collapse hinged on the pack mentality.
How do we stop it?
Education, and it has to start in the home. And communication. But one of the issues is alcohol, and we know the enormous levels of alcohol that were consumed in this instance. Alcohol is consumed in really, really high levels generally socially in Ireland. We have a very Jekyll and Hyde attitude towards drink, and the problem with excessive alcohol is it affects your communication skills, it affects your comprehension skills, and it affects your forward thinking skills.
Yeah.
So, you know, if look, you talk to any taxi driver and they'll say that when someone with a lot of drink gets into their car, the hardest thing is actually finding out which address to bring them to. They can't even express that. So in social situations, that level of alcohol is really, really problematic. But yes, just going back to what you're saying, the home is where it has to start. People have to be taught to have respect for others. And I think it's increasingly difficult for parents because of, look, every smartphone, you can turn it on and see anything on it. And there's a blurring of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable.
Generations have become inured to sexual violence through pornography.
Yes, totally, and at a very young age. Look, you can see an execution online if you want. You can see pretty much anything. And of course the other problem, I think, is bragging rights. And again, you get that with these young men, where the idea of having something to boast about after the weekend matters more than thinking, was I respectful here?
Yeah. This seems to be, certainly the conversation we're having is that life is heading one direction. And in the aftermath of a high-profile case like this, it's hard not to be very concerned about the direction that our collective society is heading. But we surely have the power and the capability to have conversations about this type of stuff and begin to engineer a future for us as a collective that's better than the direction we seem to be going.
Well, look, it does need to hinge on consent, and I think the problem is conversations aren't even happening around consent, and we need to understand, all of us, that consent can be withdrawn at any time of an encounter. I do think that the universities are recognising this and are holding classes and are particularly for first years, because they're conscious that people are going from secondary school, where you're quite sheltered, to third level education. There's alcohol.
And can you believe there was a massive outcry and a controversy about the fact that consent classes were going to be held in Trinity? I remember they were going to make them. It was like mandatory consent classes. No.
Well,
they weren't. This.
I think it was the word mandatory was the issue. People were strongly recommended to go, but you can't really make it mandatory, because if someone is there because they're under the cosh to be there, are they even going to listen? You do need willing participation in a class like that. But it's just so that people understand respect and dignity. Look, let me give you an analogy. If you have a laptop and you fill it full of bad code, you're never going to get very good use out of that laptop. And it's the same with human beings. It's the messages they absorb. And I think the problem with some young men, because I don't think it's the majority and I don't think it's the norm, okay? I think the problem with some young men is that they just, it's more important to them to be able to put up a WhatsApp message saying, we're all top shaggers, as we heard in the Belfast trial, than, you know what, I was with a girl and we held hands, or we swapped phone numbers. Things have gone from 0 to 90 very fast, but I probably sound like my granny saying that. I mean, just to totally change the tone, my Auntie Molly, who is my father's eldest sister, so the matriarch of the family, remembers when she was engaged to her husband, walking down the street holding his hand, and the priest stopping her and saying, that is unacceptable behaviour. So we have changed so enormously in a short space of time, in some ways for the better, okay, because we're not tugging the forelock, all right? And people aren't stigmatised and marginalised because of sexual behaviour, which is perfectly normal.
But no doubt the conversations that parents are having with kids haven't morphed at the same speed as society has changed. I
think the internet and the ease of access of images and the blurring of is this right? Is this acceptable? I think these are issues.
Just on the consent classes you mentioned at university level, that's obviously everything should start from a top-down approach, but it's clearly too late because quite often people are coming to university from an ingrained culture, quite often in this country from an all-boys school where their mentality is quite fixated. And is it possible to change that? And I guess it goes without saying that university is too late, but as I say, you have to start somewhere.
Well, sure, and you have to start in the home, really. And I do think that parents, need to know what their kids are looking at on the mobile phones and on the laptops. Yeah, it is wonderful. The internet is a wonderful tool. It's made the world a smaller place. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Sure. I guess as well, though, you mentioned at the top being the fly on the locker room wall, and that fly may say the language that I've overheard in the locker room is like Stone Age caveman talk, to use the cliche. But in actual fact, is it the very definition of 21st century talk, given what you've just outlined, the content at the tip of your fingers, the smartphone generation are now adults?
Well, I wonder if we're thinking less. We're better educated than ever before. More and more people have access to third level education. But are we thinking about things? And we know that from the soundbite generation. I mean, I work in newspapers. Do people, how many people read to the end of an article? They look at the headlines because that's the smartphone notion of flick, and how much are you absorbing? And also it's the echo chamber of social media where you're getting your news from sites where you know what's on them and you go along with the viewpoints there. You're not challenging your own preconceptions. So if you're in this pack where your friends all feel the same way about the opposite sex, is there any way for that to be penetrated, for you to say, well, for someone to say to you, that's not acceptable, that's not even nice?
No is the answer, right? And
sure.
So that's the issue.
Sure, it is the issue. But look, at least we're having the conversation, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously under pretty horrific circumstances.
Horrific for everybody. I mean, with that Belfast case, I know we don't want to go into the specifics, but there are no winners. There are no winners there.
I do wonder, about what happens next. This conversation happens. These conversations are happening. It is literally the first time that I remember any story where everywhere you go, everybody is talking about it. And that has been non-stop for, I would say, the last 8 weeks. Literally, we did a show in New York and every Irish person we met was talking to us about this case. We've been to London at the rugby weekend and everybody Irish person wanted to know what the story was. And it's not just rugby people, it's GAA people, it's everybody, it's every taxi you get into. And so, is the conversation happening because the details of the case are so widely reported and so prurient, and we in the South are so unused to that? Or is it because people are beginning to wake up to the notion that modern day relationships between men and women are complicated, and it's about time we all had let's get back to fundamentals and go, how do we define these things, and how do we understand them, and how do we actually make sure that the collective understanding is according respect to people and is actually based on a fundamental humanity towards each other?
Well, I suppose we are unaccustomed to that avalanche of sordid detail. And I think as well we're unaccustomed to being inside the mindset of quite a privileged group of young men. In theory, these guys were educated and from a comfortable background, well-spoken, and you might presume would have respect for the opposite sex and for older people and for all sorts of groups. One would presume that when you have that level of advantage in life, you might look on people with from a certain perspective, and we saw not back into that locker room wall. I mean, every person I've spoken to, male and female, what they come back to is the WhatsApp messages, the spit roasting, the top shaggers, the merry-go-round, that language really is jaw-dropping. But look, you two are guys. Would you say this is normal?
No, I wouldn't say.
I would hope it isn't.
And yet, it's not stuff that you wouldn't have seen at various stages. Like, there's definitely like, and you know, you pick your mates. Like, you don't hang around with people who speak like that. And sometimes you step in and go, "Shut up," and then sometimes you go, "I'm just going to keep reading my phone here." But it's not unheard of. I would say. I wouldn't say that it's a tiny coterie of people.
Well, it can't be normalised.
No,
it can't be normalised, and perhaps if there's a lesson for society from this, it's that was this in danger of becoming more widespread than we would like, and let's stop it, let's address it. There was a campaign running in England which I thought was very interesting, which compared consent to a cup of tea. Okay, now on the face of it that sounds silly, but think about it. If you offer someone a cup of tea and they say, no, you don't really, Mrs. Doyle apart, say, go on, go on, go on. You accept they don't want a cup of tea. And if 5 minutes later they say, you know what, I've changed my mind, I would fancy a drop. You don't think, whoa, that person, they're so inconsistent. All right, now apply that to sexual relations. You know, people can withdraw consent at any time, and that's the message that has to be taken from this. Young men have to understand that at any stage of the proceedings, a girl can say no. But equally, perhaps girls have to understand that they have to communicate what they're thinking. And again, that brings us back to the alcohol. High levels of alcohol affect your communication skills and your comprehension skills.
Completely. Just on that point then, when it comes to the withdrawal of consent, I guess ultimately the initial point from a male perspective anyway should be that I guess consent has to be given in an enthusiastic manner. I guess waiting for the withdrawal, there's a danger there in itself, is there not?
Sure, I mean, but look, none of us were in that bedroom, that's the problem, and I think one of the things that comes out of it is the judicial system lets people down. You know, I keep thinking, for example, and this is, everybody's entitled to a defence, but that girl in the witness box with 4 QCs challenging her version of events, which of course they had to do. Of course they had to do. Everybody's entitled to a defence, but just the system, the way it happens, what woman would put herself through that? You know, this has got to impact on numbers making complaints about sex crimes. It has to, because even if you 100% believe that that you were raped, are you going to go through that?
You're put yourself through it, definitely not.
So, and I think a case has to be made, and that applies to both jurisdictions, for the complainant to have separate legal representation, because you can't presume that the prosecutor will always represent your interests.
It makes perfect sense to have that, because you know, it was referred to on radio last night as a swearing match between he said, she said. But like, ultimately, if it's he said, she said, he mostly, in 98% of the cases, has legal representation. Mm-hmm. The state is separate, and then you're over there on your own. That makes no sense.
Yeah, you're on your own. And the adversarial system is such that the lawyers for the defence are highly motivated to pick holes in everything you say and to cast doubt, you know, to question everything from the level of alcohol you consumed to what you were wearing to your sexual history. Everything is in there, and that's in the interests of a rigorous and robust defence.
I saw a really interesting piece. There was the case in America last year, or maybe it was 2016, of the guy who got 6 months for sexually assaulting a comatose woman. He was interrupted by 2 cyclists, so there was eyewitnesses to it. And the judge had said, you know, you're guilty, I'm going to sentence you now, and I'm giving you 6 months though, because you know you've got your whole life ahead of you and I don't want to ruin your life. And I think it was Ro McDermott in her piece was talking about how the language, or maybe it was Sarah Griffin, one of them was making the point that the language about the victim is always her past and what she has done to put herself in this situation, and the language about the perpetrator is always about the impact this is going to have on his future.
Yeah.
And it's completely, like, I
It's
understand
unbalanced.
it's completely unbalanced. I understand we're supposed to have an innocent until proven guilty, but that, like, you jeopardize your future by putting yourself in the situation where you are a rapist or you are sexually aggressive. Like,
Well, and it's an awful label to carry about, for life. If it's a pretty shocking thing. So it's right that a person has a strong defence, and it's right the system of innocent until proven guilty. Nobody's questioning that. But sex crimes are held to a different standard, and it's part of our two-tier morality. And we've seen this two-tier morality in all the discussion around the Belfast case. But with a sex crime, it's always, well, what was the woman wearing? Why did she walk home rather than, get a taxi? So that someone approached her and attacked her. How did her behaviour lead to her being attacked?
Yeah.
Okay. Now you don't get that with burglary, with a house break-in.
when you say the two-tier morality, we just tease that out. What do you mean?
Well, girls were always taught, and I think subliminally are still taught, that it's their behaviour which impacts on men. So the idea is that men can't help themselves. It's biology. They're highly motivated to reproduce. That's how the human species has continued. And it's up to women to say, stop, this isn't right, I don't go along with that. Rather than it being two people, who have to take responsibility for what happens. And so you see that, for example, with the description of Belfast, where, look, I think any young girl, any woman has to take from the Belfast case. Don't go into nightclubs. Don't go into the VIP section. Don't go where there are famous sportsmen, because people will say, and definitely don't talk to them or don't recognise them, because it will be used as defence that you were flirting. If you talk to them, you're flirting, and if you show that you recognise them, it's described as you stared at them, and it's just the he says, she says takes a particular twist.
That's the two-tier morality, really.
Yeah, exactly. That's the two-tier morality.
I guess separately from this case and with rape cases in general, it's kind of almost an academic term, but it's certainly come up a lot over the last 24 hours, and it is the real rape stereotype. And you look at the statistics where the majority of rape convictions are from the complainant bringing a case against somebody who they know.
Yes.
And this real rape stereotype, this, I guess, dark alley, shady character jumping upon a victim is what I'm talking about here, just to break it down into completely blunt terms. And I guess there's an attitude towards that. Is there? Would you agree with that? That we still hold that view of rape, that it is the...
That rape is a stranger.
Precisely.
No, people are raped by those they know. I mean, but sure, marital rape was regarded as impossible for so many years, and that was a huge sea change when it was accepted that within marriage, a woman has a right to say no.
Yeah.
Our attitudes have shifted.
I mean, here's the thing, though. It almost never gets prosecuted. Like, we change the statute books, but it seems that sometimes... I mean, maybe that's important, maybe that's symbolic, and maybe that helps to signify things. Just to go back to the consent issue, right? You definitely, parents have to have full responsibility for this. But is it time we just stick it on the curriculum in primary school and go, this is something you're all going to learn as 6-year-olds, and we're just going to say this to you. No means no. And...
Yeah, well, you can teach little kids the difference between yes and no and expressing their views. I mean, probably you couldn't really get down to the birds and the bees.
But you don't have to, really, because it's...
I remember I have a little nephew who we laughed about it, but it made sense too, where there was what you could loosely call toddler assertiveness training, where in kindergarten they were trying to, some little kids were more robust than others and some felt slightly bullied, and they were teaching these 2 and 3 and 4-year-olds to say no. And the way they did it was they said, hold up your finger, do it like this. No. When Rosie wants you to get out of the sandpit and let her in, just hold the finger up and say no. Now, of course, why we laughed about it was he came home from kindergarten, and at bedtime when his mother said, okay, time for bed, he'd go, no, with the finger up. But it, it does work, that visual signal. So, but it's all down to communication, isn't it? The odd thing is we're better than ever at communication, because of social media and Twitter, and up to a point. Bear with me here, okay? So we're very good at the sharp phrase, but we're not drilling down beneath it. And are we even really listening? We're ticking likes. We're doing those little hearts and little, likes on social media. But if we even bothered reading through the whole item...
You might change your mind. Martina, thanks very much for coming in studio.
I think it's a pleasure.
It's definitely a topic that we felt was worth covering this morning. You mentioned that campaign around consent and the comparisons with making somebody a cup of tea. We're going to end this piece now with the video. It is a short production by Blue Seat Studios, I think for UK police force. Consent, it's as simple as tea.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they go, oh my God, I would love a cup of tea, thank you. Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you could make them a cup of tea, or not, but be aware they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important part, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you are entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say no thank you, then don't make them tea. At all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, yes, please. That's kind of you. And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time that it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind. And you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they're unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea. And they can't answer the question, do you want tea? Because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea. And they said yes. But in the time it took you to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down. Make sure the unconscious person is safe. And this is the important part again. Don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they'd finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they're safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it going, but you wanted tea last week. Or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat going, but you wanted tea last night. If you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you're able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand it when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea.
Bryan Robson was in Dublin yesterday ahead of the launch of Carling's Play on a Premier League pitch experience. Carling are giving Irish fans the chance to win an experience of a lifetime to play a match on a Premier League pitch. To enter, visit facebook.com/Carling Ireland. He had some pretty interesting things to say about Roy Keane. Have a look.
Yeah, I'm good. What an opportunity for Irish fans to be able to go and play on Premier League pitch. Great opportunity.
Here's the thing, we just had Kevin Kilbane count down his top 10 favourite stadiums. I'm not going to ask you off the cuff for your top 10, but apart from Old Trafford, right, which I assume is a given, is there some ground that as a kid you were like, yeah, I really want to play there, and then you got there and it was like, wow?
Yeah, I think the tradition of Villa Park, you know, they used to have the semi-finals there, and then probably because I was at West Brom and you had Villa Park just down the road from us and it was the derby game. But there was always a good atmosphere there, and then it's always been quite a lucky ground for me, you know, with United in the Cups. We always did well there. And then United in the league, we always got good results at Aston Villa.
I'm a Villa fan, so I was like, wondering where this is going.
Right?
Yeah.
You should have told me that before I started. But yeah, but then now that these new stadiums have come through, I think that's great for the game, you know, stadiums like the Emirates and that. I think it's great for football.
They're not quite the same experience, though, I presume, for players. Like, so when Kev was talking about Lansdowne Road, he said the old Lansdowne Road, not the Aviva as it is now. It's a bowl, it's perfect, everybody has perfect seats. The singing section is the singing section, whereas in the old days, the terraces were mental.
Yeah, well, what you had is, you know, some of the stadiums were right on top of the pitch. And so you could hear, you know, things that the fans are shouting. The pitch doesn't seem as big. Where in today's game, you know, with these new stadiums, it's wide open. You know, and I don't think it's as intimidating for the away players to what it used to be.
No, I mean, clearly there were reasons why the stadiums needed to be built that way for safety and for fan security and all that kind of stuff, and nobody wants to go back to that, but certainly the atmosphere is different and the experience of playing is different.
I think that's the thing. It takes away a little bit of the atmosphere. You know, it's not as fierce because of them being a lot further away from you. But I do think it's good for, you know, health and safety, which is a big issue in everything in today's sort of life. But no, the atmosphere has definitely gone out the game to a certain degree at the new stadiums.
Do you think that the stadiums is the sole reason for that?
I think it is. Plus, as well, the sitting down now. I don't think you get into as much of a singing tone when you're sitting down. When you're standing up and you're next to your mates and that, you know, one of them starts singing and then everybody joins in, they jump up and down.
Yeah.
And it's a bit more of a banter, and that's why you got a far better atmosphere.
I was going to wait until the end because we've got a lot of questions about this, but there was actually one that's very relevant. So Alan Dodrell says, I was at Main Road for the 85 replay when I was 11 years of age. It was my first Manchester United game. The atmosphere was electric. Amazing memories. Manchester United were superb. 2 questions. What do you remember of that night? And should the FA Cup semi-finals be played away from Wembley at neutral venues?
Yeah, I like it that it's neutral venues. You know, that one was a great one for me because, you know, we won the game 4 and I scored the last goal. It was a great night because Oldham had given us a real good game in the first game. But, you know, going down to Wembley, I just think it takes away from a little bit of the tradition of the FA Cup final now that... you know, it's got to be special to go to a cup final where, because the semi-finals are played at Wembley now, I just think it takes it away from it a little bit.
When you were playing at that era, did you feel that there was a sense of moving away from tradition? I mean, you were a British record transfer player at the time for $1.5 million. That was only 2 years after Trevor Francis was sold for $1 million. So clearly it increased by 50% the British record transfer fee in the space of only 2 years. We're seeing things obviously on a very different scale at the moment, moving just as quickly in terms of transfer record fees at the moment. And of course you were there from the Division 1 into the Premier League era. So I guess there's a parallel, but as I say, on a different scale from your era playing for Manchester United, where football was moving into a completely new age.
Yeah, well, I didn't really think about it until, you know, it was mentioned, you know, about how quickly it went up from Trevor Francis to myself. But then I think it actually stood for about 8 years, you know, the transfer record then, which surprised me because I had never really thought of it. Because when I first went to United, you're a bit sort of apprehensive because I'd come through the ranks at West Brom, the expectations and the transfer fees not hanging around your neck. But then you go into Man United and you sort of expect more from yourself, and so you maybe try that little bit too hard, and you don't play your natural game. So it took me, I think, the first year to actually settle down and just play my natural game.
Is that something that you as a manager then were able to impart on the big signings that you made? Relax, it's going to be okay. We've bought you because of who you are, not because of somebody that the fans want you to be.
Yeah, I mean, I can always remember Gary Pallister when he came to United. I said to Polly, because he was asking me, he's going, Rob, what expectations, because he was the most expensive defender. Record fee, and Big Pally found it a little bit of a burden because he was exactly the same. He'd come through the Middlesbrough ranks, didn't really know what it was all about, and I said to him, look, big man, just relax and enjoy your game and just play your natural game. Polly did that. Transfer fees had really gone on then when I was manager at Middlesbrough, so when I brought Juninho, he just loved football that much that it didn't affect him one little bit because he just went out and played. And then Ravanelli was a very experienced player. He just won the Champions League with Juve, and so he didn't really have anything to prove, and so Rav just got on with it and just performed how he performed.
Yeah, which was a record-breaking number of goals.
Yeah,
not bad.
Yeah, he was a good player. A very skillful player, worked really hard in training, great finisher. The only thing with Rav, which I tried to get through to him, is that just try and help some of the younger boys who were coming through the ranks at that time, because it was all more or less about his own performance. And I said, with your ability and your knowledge and experience of the game, you could help some of the young boys who are coming through in your position.
We had the trophy in a little bit earlier, and we were looking through, and there's full sections of it that are basically, there's 7. There's one which is 6 Manchester United and 1 Chelsea in the middle of it. So people who have grown up in the Premier League era, like Owen a bit, are conditioned to believe in Manchester United as this title-winning machine. But for the longest period of your career, Manchester United were undergoing, by their terms, a slump. Was there a point where you thought it was never going to happen, that you weren't actually going to be part of a Manchester United team that won the league?
Oh yeah, especially when you get into your mid-30s, which I was. And so you're thinking, is this ever going to happen? Because the year before we were really successful in the cup competitions, and we had a backlog of games, and we were playing the last 2 weeks of the season. We played 4 games a week, which was just too much, and we got a few injuries, where we'd only lost 2 league games that season. In the last 8 games, we lost 4. So it had a toll on us. But the one thing I love about the Premier League is that the Premier League came in and we won the first one. And so nobody can ever take that away from you. But yeah, United, now everybody at the club knows how important it is to sort of win the title, because Alex Ferguson inbred that into the club. So the manager, José, he knows that it's really important for us to get back on track, in the league. If it wasn't for Manchester City, I think everybody at Manchester United would be quite happy about the season. We would be sitting top of the league if City hadn't had such an amazing season. But they're setting the goalposts now, and you've got to achieve, when somebody wins the league, you've got to actually get to that level. And that's what Manchester United's aim's got to be in the summer, to try and get a few players in, motivate the players that they've got to try and compete with Manchester City next season, because we all know that Manchester City are going to win the Premiership this year.
Do you think that there's a difference now between the team-based goals of the early stages of the Premier League era, where the be-all and end-all was as a collective to win the Premier League, whereas now there is a lot of individual things on offer, whether it's financial or whether it's statistic-based stats, I guess, that people can go over? Whereas in your squad, it felt like the Premier League, the league championship was going to be the thing that you would all achieve as a collective, and to a certain extent there was sacrifices made for that. I mean, we were speaking about it earlier on, the Roy Keane signing, for example, and you pushed the signing of Roy Keane despite what impact that might have had on your own position in the squad.
Oh yeah, it's because as a club and a team, you want to win. And you know, as an individual, you want to win things, but you can't win it as an individual. You've got to win it as a team. And you know, so for me, when we won the title the year before, the manager and some of his staff were having a cup of tea, and I was involved in that, and they were talking about Roy, and I just piped in when normally I would never say anything unless the manager asked my opinion, but I just said to him, I've played against him quite a few times, Gaffer, and he's nailed on. There's no danger I would not bring Roy Keane into the club. Like you say, it was a bit detrimental to me because then Ince and Keane sort of got into the midfield most of the time, but every now and again, if they were suspended or injured, the boss would throw me in then, or he'd actually play us as a three. And the one thing, when Ince, Keane and myself played all together, it wasn't that many times, but we never got beat as a team. So yeah, you're right. I mean, it's got to be collective. And the one great thing about what happened then, the class of 92, all those young lads coming through, they knew what it was like to actually play together, win the FA Youth Cup, win the Central League or the Reserve League, you know, and they took that on board, and that's why they were very successful as well.
We've had a load of questions come in for you. I just want to get to some of these pretty quickly. So, best midfield partner you ever played with, and the one player you would have loved to play with?
Gaza. You know, it's a difficult one for me to say because Paul Ince was a great player, Keane was obviously a great player, but Gaza was a little bit special from 1990 to 96. He could do things which other players couldn't particularly do. So for me, in that era, Gaza was the best midfield player I played with.
Not a bad answer. Is there any past or present Manchester United player that Bryan would like to see or think would be good enough to manage the club in the future?
To manage, it's a real difficult one because you know, you could be a great player, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be great at management. It's because it's just such a totally new role. But I think there's quite a few out there given the opportunity at a club like Manchester United. Because I look back at my own managerial career, and you look at, you know, I was at Middlesbrough, you're at West Brom, and when you look at those jobs and you're in the Premiership, you sort of haven't got the resources, especially for transfer fees, and especially the wage bill. If you're at a club like Manchester United, all of a sudden you're expected to win, and so you can buy better quality players, you can bring on board because of the wages, better quality players. So people like Brucey, Mark Hughes, you know, Gordon Strachan, lads who I played with, they would have potential of doing that, especially at a club like Manchester United, because like I say, the revenue gives you such a much better advantage.
What about Roy Keane?
Roy, I'm not so sure with Roy. I mean, he did really well when he first went to Sunderland, but then he's a really explosive character, and I'm not sure whether, you know, that explosiveness is a good sort of cocktail for being a manager, and that's why maybe he's doing really well with Martin O'Neill, because Roy can sort of do the coaching and help in that way, where Martin sort of like has that man management style with players.
Okay, the next one is best Manchester United player you played with?
Best Manchester United player, I've got to say Keane and Giggsy are right alongside each other. The two of them were special players. That's why they won so much. both really mentally strong and determined characters to win things, and that's why they've got the records that they've got.
Last one for now. Who should Manchester United sign in the summer?
It's always a difficult one because you can see players who you're probably not going to get. But, for me, if United could go in and get Harry Kane, that would be the one I'd go for.
What about Gareth Bale? Because there's an opportunity there, it looks like, for him.
Yeah, well, I think that could be an option for United because there's been rumours about Gareth leaving Real Madrid. But for me, it depends how much money that's going to be because he has had quite a few injury problems over the last year and a half, and you just wonder whether he's got to that age where, because of him being powerful and quick, you pick up injuries. So I just think United have got to be a little bit careful with that one.
Brian, great stuff. Thanks very much for joining us.
Lovely, thank you.
It's Bryan Robson there, not having Gareth Bale and certainly not having Roy Keane as the next manager of Manchester United. Now, to something very different, I'm delighted to say Paul Galvin is here with us this morning. Good morning to you, Paul. How are you doing?
Morning, guys.
One of the things that we wanted to talk to you about was the new Kerry jersey. It's our first chance to talk to you properly about it. There was a massive response, really, to the launch of the new jersey, and obviously it was something that had been in the pipeline for quite a while. What's the story behind it?
I was contacted a number of, it was last summer actually, by the new chairman, Tim Murphy, to see if I could put my hand to maybe redesigning it alongside O'Neill's. So I did, worked closely with O'Neill's on it, and I think there's just a bit of identity in it, maybe from the 80s and that. I had to look back at some of the older Kerry jerseys and just kind of returned it maybe to what it was like. I think that 85 jersey is an iconic Kerry jersey.
Yeah.
So we deepened the colours and just, the white trims and the white cuffs, white collars and cuffs, I think are important for Kerry jerseys.
Yeah.
And deepened the colours a little bit. So, it turned out nicely. The players really liked it, the manager, Eamon, liked it, and everyone was pleased. Kerry Group, a lot of stakeholders with these jerseys, you know what I mean? You have Kerry Group and you have the county board, you have the GA and you have O'Neill, so you know what I mean, you've a lot of parties to consider, but like once the players and the people, supporters like it and the players like wearing it, I think it's important. Then the commercial side's important too, you've got to try and drive a bit of Kerry need to become a little bit more self-sufficient, I think, if they can,
The GA reporters, I can tell you, were very happy with it as well because it just makes the number on the back so much more punchy. You can actually make out the player.
That was part of the brief, actually. Tim Murphy was here. It was getting it in the ear a little bit from the old faithful at home, I can understand the issue. It's just that, the number wasn't that visible, but I think the colours, the deeper base in the colour, and elevating the number onto the green more the white on the green base gives you that definition.
Where did that come from? Are there other jerseys out there that do that, or were you just thinking?
Well, Kerry have done that on and off over the years.
Right.
If you look at the old jerseys, the number's a bit higher there on the back across the shoulders.
And just randomly, do you know who was doing that or who was behind that kind of stuff in the past? But was that?
No, I don't. Very interesting to me, though. You know what I mean? I did ask. I'm not sure who made the 85 jersey.
I'll do a quick Google here.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it was O'Neill's, and
You'd suspect it was because they got to Adidas obviously in the mid-90s.
Yeah, it was a bit of movement, but I think we did a great job. O'Neill's did a great job, and it's just there's a bit of storytelling in it, and
is it possible there's no logo
identity
on the 85 jersey?
No, there
just
isn't.
A giant GA.
And see a bit of Guaranteed Irish in the older ones, and that's about all you'll see. But we're in the kind of a more commercial era now, of course.
Yeah, for sure. Pressure in a project like that, or is it just pure joy?
No, once you're clear, I had a clear vision enough in my head of what it should be. So once you can move towards that, it's fine. But obviously, you're dealing with something that has a lot of history, and a lot of people are very interested in it and feel a sense of ownership to it. So you got to make sure you get it right,
Yeah, definitely a huge response to that, and a huge response due to the this isn't the away jersey, right? That would be wrong to call it the away jersey.
I think it's probably would, because it's just a commemorative one. I had a conversation with the stakeholders involved in the we'll say the ownership of the jersey about maybe commemorating 130 years of Kerry GA I wanted to drive that gold colour a little bit further, and I think, I really like that metallic gold. There's a whole colour psychology at play behind that colour. The blue is a little bit austere, and I just thought suggested changing it maybe for the year that was in it. It certainly isn't a replacement. I wouldn't have the power nor the desire to go replacing the Kerry blue jersey by any means, which kind of bothered me a little bit in the aftermath. There was a bit of stuff, and people were thinking maybe that I had come along and changed the colours. We changed the colours this year for the 130 years. It won't be my decision. It isn't my decision. I don't have the power to change, but I suggested it, and everyone felt it was a good idea to maybe try something new this year, and the players really liked it. Again, the players and management really liked it.
What is the psychology behind the gold?
Well, it's a colour that invokes these feelings of success and victory, and there's a little bit of that aspect to it that I think can be important. You know what I mean? When what you're wearing, you can transfer power through what you wear, and transfer through colour particularly, and that's I think I study these things through my work with Duns, and that's I'm big into colour stories. And another little thing that bugged me was like people jersey, like as if players go out on the field wearing just jerseys. You know what I mean? Like they go out naked from the waist down. Like so it's a uniform. You know what I mean? It's never designed or created in isolation. You have to like that's why the Kerry socks have a white foot on them again, just to balance the white sole with the shorts, and the jersey with the top of the socks. You know what I mean? So I really like the balance of that black and gold jersey, but to me it's always a uniform. There's no white sole on the black sock for the black and gold uniform, because that white sole would mess up the whole kit. Yeah, it had to be black, and then that gold just to be impactful on top. But so, like, you know what I mean, for me it's a deeper process than just saying, oh, that jersey is not nice or that jersey is nice. It's a uniform that carries a lot more meaning and identity and hopefully power and impact when you take the field. I mean, that's the whole point of it, is that you look like a team, you look impactful, and like, I like the blue kit. I think the blue kit I think it will make a return, but it won't be my decision whether it does or not. Yeah. But I think next year I would hope that it does, but you know what I mean.
Well, it's a chance now to have a third kit, like, and that's no.
Well, listen, this is it, Ger. You know what I mean. The commercials, and I don't like using the word, but I think Kerry can become a bit more. Maybe I have good friends around the world that have been raising money. My friend Jerry Rochford in London, and guys in the States raising big money for Kerry football. And I think we need to start to maybe become a bit more self-sufficient down in Kerry as well, to raise a bit more of our own.
So just to be clear, 130 years ago, Kerry wore gold and gold only.
No, they weren't gold. No, but the GAA was founded in Kerry in 1888. Okay. Same as Celtic, actually. 1888, Celtic Football Club. Yeah.
Oh, Kerry GAA was founded.
Kerry GAA was founded. So don't forget the hurlers are in it as well. Like, you know what I mean? The hurlers and the handball people. So Kerry GAA was founded in 1888. Right. And so this says 130 on the back. There's a bit of embossing on the back of the jersey that says 130 and the Kerry crest. So, like, I think it works, and I think most people like it, and I think it'll drive some sales, maybe extra revenues to the county board, which is the most important thing. Not the most important thing, but an important thing.
Yeah, two things. One, I was curious, there's three stripes. Adidas obviously have the three stripes, but O'Neill's seem to have three stripes in Ireland.
O'Neill's do, yeah.
It looks great.
Great bit of business back in the day. they copped that. I think Adidas didn't cover Ireland in their registration. And now O'Neill's have license to use that three stripe, which is fantastic, and it looks brilliant.
Yeah. So the next step is obviously the tracksuits, the classic Adidas tracksuits with the three stripes made by O'Neill's. Surely that's the obvious business model right here, no?
Yeah. Talk to them. It's a good show.
Just one very quick one before we move on. Just on the full kit. Does Kieran Donaghy not wear different socks to everybody else, or am I just making that up? Does he just...
For Kerry?
Yeah, for Kerry. Does he wear a solid green and everybody else wears stripy socks? Am I just making that up?
No, he wouldn't be allowed. No, he wears them pulled up. Maybe that's why it looks different.
Maybe it does. Maybe I'm being paranoid, because as soon as you mentioned that everybody's uniform, the first thing I thought was that Donaghy wears different socks.
Everyone thinks of the jersey, and I think a lot about the socks, actually, and how the socks should be.
What are the socks with the gold jersey? What colour are they?
They're all black with a gold trim, with a gold hoop.
Okay, right. So to intimidate. I did a thing recently where Bernard Brogan was talking about how they would all go out the week of a match and get their championship haircuts. Look good, play good was the motif behind it. As far as I know, Paddy would have been the first one with a championship haircut back in the day.
He was the one who invented it. He was the first man to do a lot of things. Paddy was ahead of his time in many ways. I cut my own hair there for years, and I never liked to get a haircut around the time of a game. But yeah, that's the thing. Young fellas now and championship haircuts. beyond all that stuff now.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about design in sport generally. I'm going to talk about Kylian Mbappe in a moment, but I remember when we had Andy Mitten on and he was talking about the decision that was made by Manchester United to invest a world record fee in Paul Pogba, and one of the things that the club did, obviously from a football perspective the decision is yes, we would like him, but the club had to justify spending a world record transfer fee, and they looked at his social media following and they decided as an individual he can help us push our brand to people that we're not already reaching. So it's clearly a concern for footballers at that level and for sportswear companies and for brands generally to try and engage with sport through individuals. If you can't take the full sponsorship of a club, obviously there was a nice crossover for Manchester United and Pogba, but there are other ways and means to do it by rowing in behind individuals.
Yeah, I think it depends on the club. In some ways, like I think at United, it's a bit too much of a consideration. I think it is certainly a consideration when United come to sign the players at the moment. United have become very, very commercial to my mind. But yeah, I think Adidas, United, Pogba was perfect for United in terms of, claiming back some of that 90 million and getting content. You know what I mean? Like United remind me of a social media agency at the moment.
Yeah,
it's as much about content and the players' social media platforms as it seems to be about actually the real true identity. There's a bit of romance missing from United at the moment for me. I don't know, they're hard to love at the moment. I think that model, that business model from the top down has lost its way a bit, I think, and Adidas seem to have a big handle on the club at the moment, in terms of getting players to churn out content and create a bit of value. I think Ed Woodward commercial leverages the club on the back of social media feeds and mentions and impressions and followers. I think that's part of the business model to go and leverage with these Asian sponsors that they have.
Tractor makers and whatever.
I'd leave you a bit cold. Of course, it's a part of the conversation for any professional club. It's even a part of the conversation for amateur associations now. Amateur being the amateur in inverted commas, but
yeah,
Pogba would be a kind of a marketing tool in many ways for United. I think he needs a little bit of handling and a little bit of direction on the field probably at this point now.
Is it possible to create a brand today that can be based on a storied history like Manchester United or Liverpool, or does it have to be an investment in a cool individual like Paul Pogba?
Well, I'd say the former for sure, because in my daily work I think about storytelling and identity and meaning all the time, and I think that's where the real value lies. If you can find, do your reading and do your research and start to mine the traditions of a club like United. I mine culture. I read a lot and I research a lot and I find things that interest me to put into collections over at Dunn's. But listen, the other way is probably easier. You know what I mean? A guy with 50 million followers on Instagram, get him into some Adidas gear and put him out and make a video.
It's a transaction. It's
a bit transactional, Yeah. Like the Sanchez thing is very hard on Sanchez, who I think is a superb player. But to sign Sanchez and put him playing the piano and spend a day recording content with him, surely, I'm not sure that's right. But that's the way of the world, and United are a very wealthy club probably on the back of it, so you can't have it everywhere. I just wish it was a little less of the commercial stuff.
Mbappe seems to be a different example. You've got him here. Talk to us about.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting yesterday. This is Kylian Mbappe unboxing this Nike Mercurial designed by Off-White, which is a really cult brand in the US, by a guy called Virgil Abloh, who's an architect by trade. Started making tour merchandise for Kanye West. Set up Off-White. Has just been recently named menswear artistic director at Louis Vuitton. I always have trouble pronouncing that one. But Louis Vuitton are based in Paris. It looks like Virgil Abloh is going to move from the States to Paris to take over the menswear. It's in the luxury market, and followers of Louis Vuitton have had a bit of a problem with this because he's a very outside the box appointment to the position. But I just thought it was very interesting to see Off-White, care of Nike. So Abloh's company Off-White have been collaborating with Nike for the last 2 years, redesigning the Air Maxes and Jordans and all those iconic Nike pieces of footwear. He's gone into the archive, put this Off-White slant on it, and they've been selling box loads of Nike footwear. Again, they've got a really good return off this collaboration with him. So he's now gone into football boots with them. And I think that he sees probably when he's moving to Paris with Louis Vuitton, there'll be a lot of pressure on him to take some market share back off Gucci in that luxury market sector. Gucci have kind of taken over, passed out Louis Vuitton in terms of market share. So So they see Virgil Abloh being a big appointment. It's like managers. It's a bit Gucci and Louis Vuitton are like City and United, and they're appointing people to try and win the Premier League.
And yet it's interesting that so Off-White is a small brand.
Off-White's a small cult. Well, it's getting bigger and bigger. It's a real cult brand.
Sports brand.
Streetwear. It's not really sportswear as such. It's streetwear.
Okay.
Real cult brand. They started to collaborate a lot. So they started to work with Nike. He's now on the back of his collaborative work with different brands, has been appointed at Louis Vuitton. So I think he sees PSG and Neymar, Mbappe, Dani Alves being a big part of his probably their yard. Neymar is a Louis Vuitton man anyway.
Yeah.
When Kim Jones was there, Neymar would have went to a lot of his shows. But I think you'll see a lot of Neymar, Virgil Abloh, Mbappe, Alves at Louis Vuitton shows going forward, because I think PSG will be part of the Louis Vuitton marketing drive probably going forward.
It's a nice little collaboration for them. You've got these world-class...
Absolutely, with huge followings and, look good in the clothes. And
so it's not a coincidence. They're also doing the same thing that Adidas have done with Pogba. It's like, Mbappe, you've got... Oh, okay.
Yeah, and they're trying to really match. What they're trying to really do there is try and match what Kanye West has done at Adidas. And this Yeezy stuff that Kanye West has been doing with Adidas has been phenomenally successful for Adidas. They've actually overtaken Nike in the footwear market in the States, which was a huge thing for them.
Yeah.
So
was that the first time you ever saw people queuing up outside shops overnight for a pair of shoes? Because it happened in this country, and I'd never seen it in Ireland before.
It happened here last week. There's a man called Sean, what's his name? Oh, his surname has escaped me now, but there was a footwear drop here last week on Angel Street. There was some in Brown Thomas as well, but I drove up Angel Street, coming out of Dunn's. I saw at least 100 kids outside a store called Nowhere on Angel Street, waiting to get their hands on this new footwear drop. Nike did this thing called 12 Creatives, where they have invited 12 creative people from around the world to take a Nike piece of footwear and put their mark on it.
So take our old stock, reanimate it for us.
Yeah, redesign, reimagine. So this man made a card, right? You know the old card. You ever wear cards?
I did back when I was like 14.
Well, a guy called Sean, his surname's escaping me, Sean something, but he actually made a car dry Air Max.
Right.
Great shoe, really cool shoe. And he won actually, they're in a competition and he won it, and the shoe has just gone mad, so everyone's banging the doors down. But these sneakerheads it's a big culture at the moment.
Yeah. It's very interesting, the PSG example, because they're quite a young club and there's kind of a fan base that can be moulded there. But also, you wouldn't associate Louis Vuitton with the traditional class of people that watch football. Obviously, that may be different in Paris.
No, you wouldn't, and the traditional Louis Vuitton customer won't like probably the appointment of Virgil Abloh, and they mightn't like the Mbappe and the Neymar association, because it's a very exclusive brand. But I mean, what Nike and Adidas have done and what sportswear have done to the luxury market recently has made it much more inclusive. So luxury brands are having to really rethink their strategy now, because everyone wants to wear sportswear, everyone wants to wear a piece of Off-White by Nike, everyone wants to wear Yeezy, and the luxury brands are actually losing money, and they're now having to re-strategize, introduce a lower price point, collaborate with sportswear brands to try and get access to these kids who want to wear, or not even these kids, adults who want to wear this stuff.
It's funny that they're kind of trying to harness the power of the startups and the smaller companies. When you're a massive corporation, it takes a bit of humility and a bit of vision to go, actually, I can take somebody who has their own creative ideas and give them some freedom and not worry that it's going to tarnish everything else.
There's a fantastic example of it down in Tralee. There's a young startup down in Tralee, 3D printing company, who are now working with Puma on some apparel with Puma, have been working with IKEA, and it's basically their idea. This startup, their idea is so good that all these big powerful brands with a lot of money want what they're doing,
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, you also a young kid in Puma. You have a young kid from Cork in Puma, in a position similar to Virgil Abloh, young dyslexic boy, mid-20s, designing footwear and gloves and working with a lot of the top Puma footballers, not De Bruyne, Touré and Aguero and Buffon and these guys.
Nice.
Just a nice Irish, more probably accessible angle, young guy called Conor O'Brien. But these sportswear brands are disrupting the menswear market and the luxury market particularly quite a lot in the last 12 to 18 months.
Sean Wotherspoon, does that sound right?
That's the man.
Yeah.
That's the man.
So he's the Nike corduroy dude. A text in, ask Paul Galvin his all-time favourite kit. I mean, is there, I presume...
Well, we were discussing the UCC kit earlier.
Yeah. All fair.
Oh, great kit. We wore it back in '99. Had a good bit of success in it too. Brilliant.
It's not as
kit.
cool now as it could be. It's almost as if it's ripe for somebody to change it up and have a look.
I'll talk to the boys in O'Neill, see what we can do maybe.
I'm trying to see if there's a 1999. But my memory of it is occasionally there'd be Sigerson matches on Sports Stadium back in the day. I'm aging myself here now, and you'd be like, what? They've got a skull and crossbones? That's ridiculous.
Yeah, class. Yeah, great kit. And a couple of you have the home one, and actually we wore a white one with a black hoop or a red hoop back in '99 a lot. We never wore the black and red in '99. We wore white and was it white and red or white and black? I can't remember now, but it was a great jersey, great kit, but a great kit.
Yeah.
I was keen to make that point. You know what I mean? The shorts and the socks count.
We
You could have a great jersey if the shorts and socks are wrong, nothing works.
Yeah. Like it's the black and red colour scheme. Is that something you prefer to whatever the white base one? Oh, there you go.
There you go. There's a red hoop. Yeah.
Oh, so you still have the black as a present.
The Duns people, the buyers and the design team over at Duns kill me for red, particularly red.
Why?
But red, white, and black. I just love red.
But they say you use it too much.
Yeah, I try to get it into collections a lot.
Like Tiger Woods on Sunday.
Exactly like Tiger Woods, but again, it's colour psychology, you know.
Yeah, well, that's what everybody sees Tiger and they like, oh shit, he's in the red.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, that was a great jersey, that UCC one. That one, I mean, I actually last night was posting to my Instagram. Brilliant picture. I should have shown it to you. It was England '85. It was just a picture of two punks in the England kit and the Scotland kit from the mid '80s.
Right. Yeah.
And one had a big bloody what's your man out of The Cure. He looked like the guy out of The Cure. Robert Smith looked like the guy in the English kit, and the Scottish kit. Remember the Scottish boys used to have a hoop on their jersey or on their shorts. Used to wear white shorts with navy hoop around it, and there were two brilliant jerseys. Now from a design point of view, I must say. But again, they were simple and plain, and they were just a plain base with white trims, and I think that makes for a classic.
That's anyway. It there, yeah.
Oh, there you are, look.
Oh, it is actually Robert Smith, right?
Is it actually Robert Smith?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, I wasn't sure, but
he's got the hair going on.
I sent my brother that picture and he said to me, is that Dele Alli in the Scotland jersey? And I had a closer look and I said, geez, it does look a bit like Dele Alli, doesn't it? But
the hoop and the shorts is...
I mean, they're two brilliant jerseys, and the hoop and the shorts is remarkable.
Are we just of an age now where stuff that happened in the 80s is actually cool? Like, do we reach a point where the garishness of the 90s is kind of...
In my work, in terms of menswear and design, 80s, the 80s influence is big at the moment.
So shoulder pads going back.
Kind of like, you know what we're seeing quite a bit of now is kind of a bigger silhouette, a baggier silhouette, bigger tracksuits, kind of looser, oversized sportswear, and that's really an 80s influence.
What's your least favourite kit?
Oh, I always think it's hard to make the Carlo boys look. Do you know what I mean? Just the colours again, and I study colours a lot, and you know what I mean? Hypothetically, you'd be looking in your head, having done the Kerry one, fellas would say to you, oh, do you know, are you going to do any more? But do you know what I mean? I'd like to keep doing the Kerry stuff, but you'd look at hypothetically in other counties and you'd say Cork, iconic, you could really do an awful lot with the Cork one. Yeah. The Down one, but then you look at the Carlow one and you say, geez, that'd be hard. Yeah. I think even the Kilkenny one would probably be hard to...
Yeah, what do you make of that new departure from...
I like it actually, but I just think as a base, it's going to be hard to make that.
The 70s, they had a square, the kind of the stripe stopped, and there was some of them, turning it was on the back, and I thought that there's something cool about Eddie Kerr, those pictures.
Yeah, but you know what you notice about those? I think they may have had a white trim and white collar and white cuff.
And I think they had a white patch with the black number on the back of it.
Maybe so, yeah. If I was to do anything with Kilkenny, you'd probably, but you'd have, obviously this would be only an idea, but I'd look possibly for the white trims and that, but it wouldn't be my decision.
Yeah. Getting that past Brian Cody could be an
exactly. No, I'd be going to Ned Quinn. I'd be going to Ned Quinn on that one.
Straight over his head.
Yeah.
Just on another point, and maybe a last point on kind of brands, and just because Anthony Joshua's fighting this weekend, I remember last year during the Klitschko fight, I was like, Anthony Joshua has peaked, Eddie Hearn has peaked, or they're near their peak. But the other thing that I put alongside Hearn and Anthony Joshua as really reaching the promised land was Under Armour. And you look at their endorsement of Jordan Spieth and you think about whatever 10, 15 years ago, well, not even 15 years ago, 10 years ago in this country, it was like, oh, they're the things you wear under your jersey. Whereas using those endorsements, they become not on a level par with Nike and Adidas, but in that realm.
Yeah. Not only did Steph Curry, light up the NBA, the best, one of the best players in the NBA, he literally single-handedly dragged Under Armour, we'll say, into the conversation with Nike and Adidas through his footwear. Through his footwear primarily. He had a Curry 1, Curry 2, Curry 3. The Curry 4, I think it was the Curry 4, I think he got wrong, that tanked. It cost Under Armour quite a lot of money, but Curry 1, 2 and 3 made him lots of money. And it's amazing what this, in America, these sportswear brands, the Nikes, the Adidas and the Under Armours are working directly with these individual players. They're giving them designers. They're giving them individual designers. LeBron has got a huge business.
Yeah. Russell
Westbrook is a huge business, James Harden is a huge business, and Steph Curry is a massive part of the Under Armour operation.
What's, just while you brought up basketball there, what's your view on the big baller brand?
Yeah, the dad's a bit off-putting, you know. The dad's a bit off-putting, but the boy seems to be able for it. What's his name?
Lonzo
Ball. He seems to be able for it. He's at the Lakers now, I think.
He is, yeah.
And, you know, he came along basically. The father played real hard ball. He was offered deals, and they get these deals from the sportswear companies. And basically, what the father wanted was that the sportswear company would invest into a big baller, and that the boys would have their own brand backed by the Adidas or the Nike or whoever it might be.
So is that going to become the future, maybe, of people with big egos, big talents as rookies?
Listen, maybe it's a case of having a businessman who can find the route to find manufacturing capability to create a proper shoe that's usable in the league, get a license to use it. There's a whole supply chain and manufacturing angle that's really the crux of the business. That's very difficult.
Yeah.
That the Nikes have the muscle, and in my case, it's the Duns have the muscle. Adidas have the muscle. That's the real crux of the business. I couldn't do what I do on my own. Really, it would be difficult starting out unless you had a lot of.
You go crazy.
It's really tough. It's really tough. So I mean, good luck to him if that's what Lonzo Ball's dad wants to do.
I was talking to Tommy Bowe about this recently, and he said he's been in every shop in Ireland that stocks their stuff, and like that's hard work. You know, that's like going face to face to meet small town shop owners where they might be the only menswear outlet, and he'll walk in and go, your clothes, they're too small. Your shoes, I need much smaller sizes. You go to the next town, it's like, I need bigger sizes. And he's like, I can't please everybody all the time.
Loads of moving parts. I'm going from here over to the Swan Centre in Rathmines now to meet the people that work in my brand over there, and I'm doing some fitness accessories at the moment, the old foam rollers and the speed bands and the old a balance cushion actually, which is something I think GA players should be part of their daily practice, balance work and proprioceptive work. But yeah, loads of moving parts in the business. There's always bloody challenges and conversations to be had, yeah.
Just a reminder, OTB AM is brought to you this morning with Air, the home of Air Sport. Get amazing live sporting content for free with Air Broadband. 2 quick comments to wrap up. Stuart Adamson from Big Country was the guy wearing the Scotland jersey in that one. Thanks to Brian Duggan for pointing that one out.
Not Dele Alli.
And Willie Walsh wants to know, can you ask Paul, do you need to consider the sponsor's logo when designing a jersey, as it often ruins it? He says. We love all our sponsors on this show.
You do. And we had, obviously they were in the conversation. It was very collaborative between me and O'Neill's. I was given a brief basically by the county board. I had my vision for it. I put that forward to O'Neill's. O'Neill said, well, we can do this, we can do that, we can do the other. Ultimately, you know, it's a collaboration between me and Jenny Bruin over in O'Neill's in terms of the final. But I had a couple of things: white trims, white collar, white cuff, a certain colour combination for the base. The sponsors then have to be looked after. Yeah,
they are. I think it works though. It's like because it's Kerry, because it's like that's the name on the shirt. It's exactly who we are. It's kind of a, you know, there are some other counties that don't have.
Don't have a logo. It's just a square with the thing in it, and that just destroys it.
Yeah.
It's a thing that gets lost, it's a consideration that gets lost when you talk about managers in the GAA today and players in the GAA today, and we'll say the expectation upon them, not the ask, but the expectation upon them in terms of the media that they do. You know, like they're walking advertisements in many ways, like, you know, and
that's where the tension comes from. Like a lot of the tension comes from everybody's making out from this. Except us.
Yeah, it's a funny one. It's a funny one to get the balance right in, you know. But I suppose, you know, yeah, the jersey. There's plenty stakeholders when it comes to these jerseys. You know what I mean? And they are all in it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And they, you know, nobody wants to own it, but you know, everyone wants to be part of the story of a particular county, and it's fantastic in many ways. You know what I mean? It's just. Local businesses and it's a great, you know, I think these sponsors, I'd like to hear more from them at times in their story and their backstory, and you know what I mean, how they started up. I think just this startup culture and this business culture, I think, has blown up in Ireland in the last 2 years or so.
Yeah.
You see all these newspaper supplements now, and the business parts are getting bigger and bigger, and actually the sports content within the business supplements is getting bigger and bigger. So it's a very interesting time at the moment for
sure. One last point, you're back playing club football in Kerry, is that right?
Well, I'm back. My registration is back in Kerry with my club in Fenwick, and
Will you get a game?
will I get a game is the question now, you know. So look, I mean, I think this will be my last year now playing football. Whatever, how much I play, I don't know, but I just wanted that was always my intention, was that whatever couple of games I play now will be my last few games, and they'll be with Fenwick. So that's all that is, and just important for me personally, and you know.
Are you still the same footballer you always were? Is that like is your game the same, or have you become in hurling you can kind of move out to midfield and just catch ball and play around, but football's not quite the same, is it?
The game is different. Like, I don't see too many players of my type really in the game anymore. I don't see players in that area. Do you know what I mean? I don't see players occupying those half forward areas.
Yeah.
I just don't see them in the positions. Do you know what I mean? I think positional play.
They're more defenders now.
Well, they're running. I think everyone runs a lot more now anyway. Positions are less important in many ways. Do you know what I mean? Especially up front.
Yeah.
It's a very, very fluid game now at the moment, and I don't know, Ger, what kind of a footballer I am. It's a while since I played. But I'll tell you one thing: I'd be a different footballer in Dublin to the footballer I'd be in Kerry anyway. That's for sure.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's a different game up here, like, and I see, you know, I played in Cork, I played in UCC, played in the Cork County Championship for 2 years, Kerry County Championship, the Dublin County Championship, and I was probably a different footballer in all those championships. You know, different culture. You know, the counties have different cultures and different ways of playing, and you have to adapt to them. And so we'll see. You know, I'll go home. I might do a bit with the boys and give it up for the boys at home for a finish. And
well, best of luck with it and enjoy it.
Thanks.
You've opened a whole can of worms there about the different club cultures, which we might get back into at some point in the future. But for now, we're out of time. So my thanks to Paul for joining us in studio today. My thanks as well to Martina Devlin for joining us a little bit earlier on. If you missed that, we had an interesting conversation around the issues of consent and some of the other issues that were thrown up after the verdict in the Belfast Rape Trial yesterday. We're back tomorrow morning on Good Friday from 7:45. Owen and Dave are going to be in studio. Alan Quinlan's going to join them to help preview the weekend's rugby action. Kevin Kilban and Robbie Power are going to join us as well ahead of the Boyle Sports Irish Grand National on Monday. And obviously we're back on the radio tonight from 7 with all the goodness you'd expect from Thursday nights off the ball. Good luck.
OTB AM. In association with Air. Get Air Sport free with Air Broadband.